This is the map D6, released in January of 2006 as an official campaign track in Trackmania Nations. At a first glance, a very simple looking track, consisting of only a wall ride turn up to the finish, and it didn't take very long for players to optimize it. After only a few months, the world record list on D6 included a triple tie at 9:46, and the rest of the top 10 were all within 200ths of a second. Perhaps this is to be expected for such a short track, but in a game as complex as Trackmania, you'd be surprised how far the records can be pushed. A few weeks later, something incredible happened, with the entire top 10 having 4-second runs, and the world record being a 3.99 by Smokey. For the first time in the game's history, a map had been shortcut using a combination of two ridiculous bugs. And in the 18 years since this event, players have only gotten better at harnessing the flaws in the game to optimize their runs to perfection. This is the story of how Trackmania players conquered bugs. The D6 shortcut is truly historic. It was done for the first time in the summer of 2006, and it opened most people's eyes to how broken a game Trackmania could be. The idea of the shortcut is obvious enough, but getting up to the finish looked impossible. No matter how you climbed the wall, you just wouldn't get the height required to fly through the finish. But perhaps that wouldn't be a problem, because already on the second day of the game being out, a big discovery was made on another campaign track. On the 28th of January in the same year, the player Hanu was driving age 3 and attempting to get a good time. It's another very simple map with just a quarter pipe jump up to a few different finishes. Since he was aiming for the top finish, he flipped out late and high from the quarter pipe, but he still undershot the jump by a lot. Fortunately though, he managed to hit the exact area just below the finish line, and his run counted. In the days following, hundreds of players copied this strange bug to get their own 4-second time on the leaderboards. But for a while, it didn't see much use beyond that one map. Copying a strategy you've seen someone do on a track and having the foresight to attempt it on other maps is two quite different things. It would take 2 months before another use case of it was found on the track G2, where the world record strategy used to be threading the needle in a precise gap. But where now, with the knowledge of the bug finish being possible, Algor38 dropped off the side of the railing early, hitting the finish line from the side and improving the world record by a huge margin for such a short track. The reason this works is due to an oversight from the developers that has the finish line hitbox extending out to the side of a block, and it can also be hit from underneath, exactly below the road border. A few months later, and in the case of D6, it's likely that some players knew the bug finishes existed, and it's natural to set up on the left side to try to fly up into it. But without getting the wheel lift, the shortcut wouldn't work. And what exactly was that thing? Nobody really knew why it happened. But when crossing the green border enough times, this weird phenomenon would eventually happen, and if it did, you could beat D6 in just 3.9 seconds. In broad terms, this was the Trackmania equivalent of a caveman striking 2 rocks together and accidentally making a fire. A stunning coincidence that, if it could be properly understood and harnessed, would have massive implications for other tracks too. Though before trying to understand the bugs, players wanted to know whether or not they would be patched out of the game, as they were frustrating in regular gameplay and even in competitions, where many great runs would fall victims to crossing the side edges and getting a huge wheel lift, instantly resulting in a crash. And for the devs, it must have been a difficult situation. On the physics side of things, it's likely they didn't know how to easily fix these bugs without making changes to the car or blocks, which would come with a new set of problems, invalidating past records and breaking old maps. But the biggest issue was likely financial. In 2008, Nadeo revamped all their past games into 2 titles, Trackmania Nations Forever and Trackmania United Forever. Nations Forever was completely free to play, and featured the Formula race car, where United had the Formula race car plus 6 other vehicles that you could compete on. Nadeo's business model was banking on that people would discover Nations Forever and then later upgrade to United to play the other cars. But almost nobody did. In Nations, you could play endless hours of content in online lobbies, official campaigns, and user-made maps. You could also make your own maps and skins as well. With so many things being offered for free, it made very little sense to upgrade. And this almost caused Nadeo to go bankrupt before they were bought by Ubisoft in late 2009. And for Nadeo, it made no sense to focus their efforts on improving the free game when they wanted to get players over to the paid version. And so, shortly after its release, Trackmania Nations Forever was considered a finished product. No further updates would be pushed, and everything that existed in the game was there to stay. Bug finishes, landing bugs, wheel lift bugs, and many more would all live on, unpatched forever. It's easy to think that the existence of bugs automatically make a game worse. After all, they are mistakes and oversights, so they should be fixed until everything is perfect. But perfect can sometimes be boring and predictable. And in the case of Trackmania, the bugs provided a unique gameplay experience that no other racing game had. And maybe that wasn't such a bad thing, because even the most annoying bugs, like the wheel lift, could have its moments. On the official track BO4 Acrobatic, the world record seemed completely maxed out in 2009. The track itself is again simple, featuring only a downhill, a wall ride, and a straight line to the finish. And the leaderboard looks just like you'd expect, with the entire top 10 being within a few hundredths of a second, and the world record being a 12:56 by Karjan. But then, one small accident led to a big spark in the community. A completely unknown player called Zombie uploaded his one and only ever replay to the leaderboards, a run on BO4 Acrobatic, where he unfortunately got the wheel lift bug in the start, which on a map as precise as this would make most players instantly hit the restart key. But he decided to keep driving, and it resulted in a world record tie. As wonky as that run looked, Zombie inexplicably gained time from the bug, and whatever it was, it opened the possibility for a new world record on an otherwise optimized map. Several top players took note of this and rushed to BO4 to be the first to do it. And in May of 2009, the player Barta eventually got this run. A 12:54, beating the world record by 200ths of a second. This record has since been improved many times, and it was only in recent years understood that the reason the bug gains time is because at high speed, sliding on one front tire is extremely fast. Which might be an explanation that makes you even more confused, but that's Trackmania for you. The wheel lift bug would later become known as the Ramstein bug, and it wouldn't only be useful on BO4 Acrobatic, because the next year, a similar accident happened on the track AO3 Race. The world record at the time was 18:45, tied by 3 people, and the rest of the top 10 all had 18:46. Yeah, it's another map that mostly had basic turns, where players aimed for ultimate precision, and the one key feature on the track is a jump in the middle. The main strategy was to release the acceleration on this jump, in combination with driving diagonally, so that you would reduce as much airtime as possible, and carry maximum speed on the last straight towards the finish. In 2010, the player Enax was driving AO3 on an online server, when he got the luckiest bug of his life. (18:44), beating the triple world record high by just 100th of a second. The Ramstein bug Enax got caused his front wheel to lift at just the right time to dive over the top of the hill, landing in the downhill on the other side at full speed. And though his landing was shaky, he kept his cool and kept enough speed to beat the world record. The community was just stunned at this. Nobody had seen anything like it, and attempts to recreate it were unsuccessful. Nobody else could get the bug that Enax got. But impressively, in 2011, Damager managed to beat the world record without using the bug, achieving at 18:43. And since then, the idea of the AO3 bug was kinda forgotten about. something else in the Trackmania world had been stealing the spotlight. And that thing was yet another bug, which fundamentally changed how several maps were played. Late in 2009, it was discovered that when landing 90 degrees sideways, you could perform a fast and powerful drift on grass, preserving way more speed and grip than if you tried to drive the turn as normal. At first, this was called grass riding, then grass slides, and afterwards it was named after a certain plant for whatever reason, before the community finally landed on the mostly agreed upon bug slide as the term. Many tracks were built with bug slides in mind, and they became very popular on online servers. For most players, bug slides were just casual fun, but one player realized there was more potential in this trick than just playing in online lobbies. Early in 2010, the player J&B would completely revolutionize many maps in the game when he went on a world record spree. It started in April when he completely crushed the world record on the track D11 Acrobatic. The old record from Macron of 12 seconds did 2 very clean jumps, without any real wild things going on. J&B though realized that with a precise jump, he could do this. A bug slide on the ramp, going through the ring in a 360 spin and landing up on the last platform, saving 1 second. But he didn't stop there. 2 weeks later, he went on to another campaign map, B12 Race, where the last turn is a long grass corner. Traditionally, the best strategy was to jump out all the way to the right side so that you could carry as much speed as possible with a smooth line towards the finish. J&B, however, did the complete opposite, going fully on the inside and using the pool border to get airtime to set up sideways. And then he bug slid through the last corner, again using the pool borders to straighten his car towards the booster and the finish, beating the world record by 0.3 of a second at first, but later improving down to a 40.45, over 1 second faster. This was the first time bug slides had been used to beat the world record on such a prestigious map, and many community members outright couldn't believe it. This bug had existed in the game ever since Trackmania Nations in 2006, and it took 4 years for it to be discovered and properly harnessed. But now the floodgates were wide open, and a new era of Trackmania world record hunting had begun. The player Bliss, who had the world record on a similar track, B07 Race, claimed that the trick wouldn't be possible there. But less than 1 year later, it too got completely destroyed by bug slides. Then there was A09 Race, a short map with a lot of tricks, where in the last turn you could skip across the pool and land in a small bug slide. Perhaps not as flashy as some of the other ones, but still another one on the list. Bug slides are really difficult to control. You really just hold accelerate, brake, and steering, hoping it will take you through the turn nicely, but they often result in crashes. And in 2011 and 2012, when some players crashed while bug sliding, their car inexplicably went flying, getting launched across the stadium at Mach 5 speed. What on earth is going on here? Why this bug works is not fully understood, but the best theory is that the game sometimes misinterprets your speed values when bug sliding, and if you crash in this state, it gives you more speed rather than reducing it, sending the car flying. Players at the time didn't know any of this. They just tried to replicate what they'd seen in the liftoff videos. And sure enough, bug sliding towards a road border with the car pitched slightly upwards could every now and then yeet you across the map. 4 years after being left to their own devices by Nadeo, Trackmania players had just discovered how to make a Formula race car fly, a sight that to the developers must have been totally hilarious and absurd. The game they designed to be a regular Formula racing game was turning into so much more, and though it seemed crazy, it was now only more competitive than ever. This bug was coined the Uberbug, derived from German and meaning the biggest bug. Players scoured the official maps to find somewhere it could be used, eventually realizing there was at least one map which had all the factors required. This track is quite literally perfectly designed for the Uberbug to work. It has speed in the start, a drop down to set up the car in a bug slide, a road edge to lift off from, and several finishes pointing in that direction. Exactly where you'd fly to you had no control over, but since this skips a huge right turn, if you landed anywhere near the finishes, it would save several seconds. I've made an entire video detailing the world record history on A12 speed, which I will link in the description. And hey, if you're interested in more videos like this, then subscribe. Looking at the series of events in a broader picture, it's fascinating to see the evolution of Trackmania's world record strategies over time, going from mostly precise racing lines in the early days, to more and more complex quirks in the game's code being understood and exploited. As a player, the goal has always been the same: to go as fast as possible. The only difference was that now, players knew of more ways to gain time than before, regardless of how weird these tricks were. These events were still over 1 decade ago, and since then, things have escalated to even greater levels. In 2013 is where the true golden era of Trackmania shortcuts began. That year, the player Nino created the team Fastest Way Only, a shortcutting team of dedicated players trying to break as many maps as possible. One of the tracks they'd set their sights on was G1, a unique map with a road spiraling upwards, and a pretty absurd shortcut idea that, if it could be pulled off, would look pretty stunning. The team hunted the map for several weeks, and eventually it would be the team's leader Nino who pulled off this run. A beautiful Uberbug near the top of the map, skipping 2 layers of roads and ultimately saving over 4 seconds against the world record. But the team didn't stop there. On the map D3, a platforming track with tight turns, they discovered it was faster to drop off onto the grass before the last corners and crash sideways into a pillar below the finish to bounce up into the hitbox, saving 2 seconds. There really was no limit to the creativity and invention at play during this time, and it was all enabled by the bugs not being patched out years prior. Instead of becoming another indistinguishable racing game, Trackmania had become known for having these incredible tricks available, and players were far from done exploring. In 2015, Fastest Way Only were hunting age for 1 lap, and going for a ridiculous shortcut from the first to the second checkpoint. The gap you would have to cross looks so absurdly far, but with a proper wheel lift, you can actually soar all the way across. And this shortcut was pulled off by both Nitro and Tomil. During this time, some players finally understood how the Ramstein bug works. Maps in Trackmania are built with blocks, and the road pieces all have this elevated grey border running along the sides, called the Ramstein border. At the connection point between blocks, this border doesn't connect perfectly, and if you precisely cross the border at this exact point, your wheel can crash into the start of the next block's border, making the wheel lift into the air. As it turns out, this bug wasn't random at all, it only required precision. After age 4 fell, so did the track C9, where several Fastest Way Only members hunted for weeks to try to get a Ramstein bug skipping the last corner. Eventually, it was finally pulled off in a beautiful fashion by the then somewhat unknown player, Pablo GD. When Pablo drove the record, everyone was freaking out in the in-game chat, and in a legendary move, he just responded with a simple, "Thank you." These Ramstein bug shortcuts were the snowflakes that would cause an avalanche in Trackmania. Once players opened their eyes to using the most annoying bug in the game as a weapon, countless world records would fall. Anywhere a huge bounce was needed, or spots where a bug could reduce airtime, players would grind for the perfect wheel lift. And so, the era of the Ramstein bugs began. the map A7 saw a new world record after 14 years, where it was thought to be maxed at 10.11 in 2006, but in 2020, Nadeo managed to shave off 1/100th with a tiny Ramstein bug at the jump. And in 2016, I myself even used a Ramstein bug to join fastest way only with this shortcut. One of the most spectacular shortcuts that were performed was on E0. Seen from above, a pretty simple track, with just 2 checkpoints and a long road to the finish. In 2017, players started trying to shortcut up to the first one and then following the road until the ending. The theory for how this would work is you would climb over the wall at the start and then bug up through the roadblock, and from there you'd continue driving as normal. I won't even try to explain this one, it just works. But mostly doesn't. But if it does, the problem is you won't have as much speed for the uphills, and so the normal way would get dangerously close to catching up. But it was eventually pulled off, and Plasterx managed to get the world record on this map with that strategy, driving a 36:10 in 2017. In 2021, this map would see a new revolution, when Misiak pulled off this shortcut. A huge ram lift directly up to the checkpoint, saving another second over Plasterx's run. I feel at this point it's necessary to say that the majority of Trackmania maps are completely normal, where only clean racing lines will get you a better time. But the handful of tracks I've featured are the ones where bugs have added a huge spark of magic and wonder to the game, giving players so much creativity to think outside the box to improve their times. And what's cool is that the developers at Nadeo have now embraced some of the bugs as official features. In 2020, they released the newest Trackmania game, and in it, they finally got rid of annoying landing bugs, and actually the Ramstein bugs too, but surprisingly they decided to keep bug slides in the game, as well as Uber bugs and a handful more, showing that they too recognized how their original mistakes turned into something unique. And this goes hand in hand with one of the biggest community events in the game, called Khaki, where players build the most ridiculous bug-ridden track they can think of, and grind them for a month straight. One final map I want to mention, A09 Race, briefly mentioned earlier during the discovery of the bug slides. And since that time, the strategy had remained mostly the same, and got optimized all the way down to 24:46 by Racehans. His run was so far ahead of the competition that it was thought it wouldn't be beaten for a long time. Racehans had driven a fast start up to the checkpoint, getting the maximum speed out of the grass wiggle, and doing a tiny release of the acceleration at the top of the hill to carry speed onto the engine off part, did a tight turn, and followed that up with a clean downhill drop. He did another precise turn onto the grass, and closed it out with a perfect bug slide into the finish. And even though it looked completely absurd, some players like Trinity and Hefest still tried to beat it. When comparing the segment times of the top 30 records, they noticed an anomaly. On the second segment, Racehans had a 5:53, and while most people were in close proximity to that, the player Prague had mysteriously gotten a 5:47. For maps as optimized as A09, that's a huge time save. But what had he done exactly? Well, since this was an online list of records, there was no way to know for sure. The record was from 2012 and could have simply been bugged or perhaps even cheated. The segment it had happened in was the drop down from checkpoint 1 to checkpoint 2, and players immediately began thinking it could in fact be a Ramstein bug. Some preliminary attempts were made to get a bug, with only moderate levels of success. Without a recipe to follow, it's hard to come up with a perfect dish. But all of that changed when an ancient YouTube video was discovered by a community member, Street Style Clan, the movie. The video is a 2012 montage of Trackmania records from the clan Street Style, where one of the maps featured is A09 Race, and in it you can see a car get a huge wobble followed by a nosedive on the drop. That is Prague's run, and this is the only surviving footage of it happening. It's likely Prague had gotten this by complete accident. Upon seeing this and analyzing the line he drove, players now had a blueprint to follow for the approach, to try to get a similar dive over the edge of the hill, which could save huge amounts of time. In April of 2020, Fastest Way only members gathered like they usually do to try to bring this one home. And after many promising attempts that night, Trinity finally got this run.
Holy shit!
308?
Good start as well, right?
Yeah, really.
What? No way. So, what the fuck? Oh, en dat einde.
To me personally, this is one of the most beautiful runs in Trackmania history. It combines everything I love about this game, as it requires precision in performing a great grass speed slide in the start, and getting a precise no airtime flick up the hill as well as a tight turn, to build up so much speed that with a huge wheel lift Ramstein bug, the nose of the car can in an extremely rare case dip perfectly into the downhill at full speed, reducing airtime and having a huge speed advantage to the last checkpoint. And then you can finish in style with a bug slide. If it wasn't for Trackmania's huge flaws, I think it would become boring and fall flat as just another racing game, instead of one that's known for its incredible complexity. And I, for one, know I wouldn't have gotten hooked on the game without that element of wonder, that anything can happen part. And I think it was as true in 2006 as it is now in 2024. Anyways, that's all for now, guys. I really hope you found it entertaining and perhaps learned a thing or two about Trackmania history. Until next time, have a good one.